Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, well, you guys have come to the right spot because we are dishing out more of our A+ series. I've been enjoying it very much so far. Hopefully you have as well, because joining us back in the studio again today to help lend his expertise to this topic, our good friend, Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, how's it going, man?
Man, it's going great. Great to be back here. That's right. Continuing on, and we've really, over the last few episodes, been in our first domain. The first domain being the Windows operating system, and well, we're gonna continue along here with the Windows operating system. But one of the things that when we talk about, what's the title, right? Preventive maintenance. Now, I'm going to use this term interchangeably. In fact, Dan and I were talking, our director out there, we were talking about it before we even started, that you're going to hear me say preventative maintenance as well, right? So understand that the formal objectives that we're looking at right now, 1.7, perform common preventive maintenance procedures using the appropriate Windows OS tools. However, again, I'm going to say preventative, right? So either or, understand that it's not a semantic that you have to worry about on the exam, because you do get the point. Remember,
It's going to be fun. They give you the question, is it preventative or preventive?
That's right, that's right. And I always tell people, I said, you know, if you understand what's going on and somebody points to the moon, don't critique the finger that's pointing. Pay attention to what they're talking about, right?
Exactly.
So,
good point,
we
Wes.
do have to keep that in mind. Now, and one of the things I also want to preface this with is, even though we're talking about Windows OS, this goes for any operating system. In fact, we're going to be looking heavily at Windows, but let's go ahead and take a look at my screen real quick, and let me kind of show you what's going on behind the scenes, right? I actually have my Mac going on, my Mac that we're running, and we're running our virtual machines on that. Well, I was kind of telling Dan in the background, I'm actually doing preventative maintenance as we speak right here, because it's important for me to make sure, and Dan as well, and all the other hosts and subject matter experts that we have here, that our systems are up and running for our shows, right? We want to bring you that great content. We want to bring you these great shows so we can impart the education, impart the information to you. But if my laptop fails, well, I'm going to fail to be able to impart anything, right? So I want you to...
failure, Wesley.
That's right, that's right. Big failure. So we have to make sure that we're doing this, and it doesn't matter what operating system we're in. So I do want to just let you know that, yeah, we'll be talking about Windows, but this is what we, proverbially saying, we practice what we preach. We have to back up our system. So I'm actually doing this live right now, live through recorded TV, right? I'm actually doing this in the background right now. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there as a side note, even though we're going to be in our Windows operating systems in this episode. So one of the first things they talk about are scheduled backups, all right? Now, what do we mean when we talk about scheduled backups? Well, first of all, we're talking about a way to ensure that when we set a backup, we can walk away from the machine, and then at a certain time, it's going to run a backup. It's going to run, basically, it's going to take copies, right? Let's start very basically. What is a backup to begin with, right? Well, I have a couple different types of files that we always want to make sure that we have access to, all right? Some are more important than others, depends on what your perspective is, right? And what I mean by that is, well, the operating system has crucial files that are important for the operating system to even function, right? But then you also have user files, right? We've talked about user profile. In fact, let me show you our Windows 8.1 machine here. If I drop down to my File Explorer, we'll dig down in Local Disk C, and we'll get into users. Remember, we talked about the user profile a little bit, in past episodes, right? And the user profile is just that collection of directories, folders, if you will, in the GUI directories inside of your command prompt, where we store information that is specific to each user, right? And every user has a user profile where they have a collection of folders that they store their information. Now, for your end users, this information is very, very important, right? We have to make sure that if we're using things like line of business applications, right, that we have that company data that is saved. Well, it is no different than if you're saving this information in a network share, like we've shown you in past episodes, mapping network drives, right? We still have to go to that computer. It might just be a server that we're saving information on, right? We still have to back up that user data. But if I dig down in here into Local Disk C, understand that I've also got Windows files that are very, very important, right? The operating system files that we need just to have this operating system running. Now, the reason I said that it depends on what your perspective is which one is more important than the other, right? Why do I say that? Well, when we look at client operating systems today, they make it very, very easy to recover from operating system failures for us today. We've got a lot of utilities that we've talked about in past episodes, things like System Restore, right, where we can restore the configuration to an earlier point in time should we happen to have some kind of error, if you will, or driver causes a problem. We can do complete system restores, right? I can go, if I wanted to do recovery, right, I could jump down to our Charms menu here, go into PC settings, right? And then over here we have what's known as update and recovery, right? And when we talk about update and recovery, right, we have to understand that I could do a complete refresh the PC, right? So it says if your PC isn't running well, you can refresh it without losing your photos, music, video, and other personal files, right? In a home environment, right, this might be a little bit more important to you because it's not so easy to just rush out and grab a new operating system, right? So your system files and then obviously your photos and your music, that's going to be very, very important to you. However, in a corporate environment, a lot of times, and Dan, I think you've mentioned this and I've mentioned this in past episodes, if something gets hosed up with the operating system, and we can't solve it within a few minutes, it's not convenient. And I think you said money isn't really conducive to the time and relative to the money that they would pay you to try to fix the operating system. What do you guys usually do?
Yeah, if it got to be where it was just taking too much time, we would just say, you know what, we've got a nice little room right over here where there's a guy in here creating new computers with fresh installs that should work just fine for you. I'm going to send you one of those. You send me that hunk of crap you've got right there back. And you know what we'll do with that? We'll re-image it and we'll send that to somebody else because it'll be just like it was brand new. It just makes things a whole lot easier. When you work in line of business, it's not about having your mahjong games and keeping your free sale scores high. It's about, does it have the applications I need to run my business? If it does, great. If it doesn't, I need one that does.
And I need it now, right?
Yeah.
Or I need it yesterday. Yeah. You know, time is money. So you can see, just like given a scenario like that where operating system files, yes, they are important, but they're not detrimental because we can always replace it. We can reinstall an operating system. And while that is happening, your user is logging into another computer, continuing to work with their files. Again, from the home user's perspective, things are very important, right? I've commonly said this, that the only files, even in a home user, you know, at my home, the only files that are so important to me are my photos of my family. Those capture our memories, and we like to keep them in our mind, but we also like to see them, and it's something that we can't just duplicate anymore, right? So I'm not worried about the operating system. I'm not worried about any application. I don't care what it is. Why? Because I keep copies of my license. Here's where we go to the backups, right? So those might actually be in some of the documents that I back up. I keep my license so that if I have to reinstall an application, I can reactivate it and I'm good to go. Now, there are some ways that we can do this, right? There are some ways that we can ensure that the crucial files within the operating system get backed up. Now, I'm in Windows 8.1 here, and there are some very different ways that we do this between Windows 7 and Windows 8.1, and then honestly, from Windows 8 on, right? They kind of changed a lot of things because of the fact that they make it a lot easier for you to reinstall Windows today. So in Windows 7, what we do is we're going to drop down to our Start button. We're going to go into Control Panel. All right, we're going to go into System and Security, and they have a utility in here called Backup and Restore. All right, so right there in the Control Panel, we've I don't know if we've mentioned this in the Control Panel utilities, but just know that it is a Control Panel utility. And when I get in here, I get the ability to do a few different things, right? If I want to make sure that I back up everything in the current state that this machine is, well, guess what? We talked about in another episode when you're installing Windows, we do image deployment in a corporate environment. Well, guess what? Inside of Backup Restore, they give you the ability to take an image of this machine. You can take a bit-by-bit, file-by-file copy of everything, including the operating system in its current configuration. So how's that beneficial? Well, there's pros and cons, right? The con is that it takes a long time to run an image, especially if you've got like a terabyte-sized drive, because it's going to copy everything, including slack space, or including blank space. I mean, it is a literal bit-by-bit copy. So that's really the only con to it. The pro is that if this hard drive fails, if I get a malware, I almost said a malware, I don't know what that is. That's a combination of a virus and malware on our machine. If I get a virus on my machine and I just can't recover, well, guess what? I can format the hard drive. I can take this image, boot up to the pre-installation environment in the recovery tools that I can also use from creating a repair disk, and I can re-image the system. However, Maybe I don't want to go through all that. Maybe I just want to do a backup, all right? Well, this is scheduling a backup. Notice that it says set up backup. This is the first telltale sign on the exam that you have never scheduled a backup, right? Just because it says set a backup, all right? So we're going to go ahead and do that, all right? And it's going to say starting the backup. And what it's doing is it's not actually running the backup yet because we got to tell backup and restore a few different things, all right? What we need to do, first of all, is we need to say where is the backup going to reside, right? Because we're going to take copies of the files, right? And we can get really specific on what we take. And I'll show you what I mean when I say that we can pick and choose. If we want operating system files, we can use those. If you're like me and it's more important that I just get my photos, well, we can also be selective about that. So there's a few different things that you can use here, right? Notice that they have the optical drive. I wouldn't recommend this. Here's why. If that's all you have, well, at least you have something. If you have a 50 gig, 100 gig, 200 gig backup, guess what? Your DVDs, at best, have 9.7 gigs on them, 9.4 gigs if they're double-sided. Typically, they only have 4.7 gigs.
So get you a spindle is what you're saying.
That's right, absolutely. You're going to, I mean, even
instead of weekend aside.
That's right, because even in only 47 gigs, you're going to have 10 discs that you're going to be putting in, and you are going to have to stay there.
Well, plus it only writes at a certain speed, and it's not that, I mean, it's fine, but it's not great like hard drives, USB 3, Thunderbolt kind of speeds.
It's very hands-on process,
Yeah.
too, because when we say scheduling backups, one of the great things is we set it and forget it, we walk away, and we know it happens. If you're saving this to optical drives, you're waiting. And it's going to stop the backup, and it's going to eject the drive.
Got you a good binge watch TV series because
that's right.
You're going to be sitting there with a computer.
Yeah, that's right. You might want to implement some quality of service on your Netflix stream, you know. So I don't recommend it. However, you can always have something, all right? And you can see that they're telling you that an external drive is the way to go. This is another drive that's in this machine, and you want to, it won't let you save it to C drive, C:. Why? Well, you're backing up C:. You're not going to back up the drive that you're making a copy of to the drive that you're making a copy of. It just doesn't make sense. Now, the other thing that you could do as well is you could save it on the network as well. So we could type in our UNC path, and if you end up having, you know, a location out there on the network, like you guys have seen, the same exact network share that we've shown you in other episodes, I could browse to that, right? And let me make sure that I'm authenticating against the domain here. I'm not sure if it's going to give me a hard time. And it validates location. Okay, so I could also back the information up to the network too. I'm going to go ahead and what I'll do is I'll do a local, this is also called a local backup because even though it isn't to the local C drive, it's still local to the machine, right? If I do a network backup, it's actually going to a remote location, wherever that location is that you're sending it. Just remember where you send it, all right? All right, so we'll go ahead. We're just gonna we'll use the local disk C. I did want to just show you the three possibilities that you would have there. Now, this is kind of cool because you can let Windows choose. If Windows chooses, you can see, right, it says that it's going to save all the libraries, desktop, default Windows folders, right, and it'll create the system image, which is great because now you've got a system image that'll reinstall your operating system and you can point your files back to the locations that they were previously before you had the problem. I'm a bit of a rebel, and I'm not going to do anything that's recommended. You just ask my doctor. And we'll choose next here. And here's where we can get kind of really granular on what we want to save, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and I'll uncheck all of this. And in fact, I'll uncheck pretty much just everything, right? So I could drill down in here and I say, hey, you know, it's really my pictures that are important. For me, that's good. You might not want to do this. You might want to do everything, right? And then what I can do is down here, I can include the system image, right? Here's a little thing to keep in mind. Sometimes on the CompTIA exams, they tell you how would you do a restoration, because backup is preventative maintenance, but remember, restore is still part of that. If I restore the machine and I use the system image, I also have to create a system repair disk. Why is that? A lot of times you don't have your installation medias anymore. It's very few and far between. A lot of times you'll have a recovery partition, which is good, but sometimes you don't even have that. So what you need is the Windows recovery environment, WinRE as it's called. this makes oops, excuse me here, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where I sent my backup. So let me go ahead and start that over here as I'm, oh, okay, great. I knew that was going to happen. So
Worked very well, Wes.
yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. I meant to do that.
That's right.
But so know that you do have to have your system repair disk, because what happens is when you boot your computer, remember we've talked about boot methods before, I'm going to point it to the optical drive, and then what it's going to do is it's going to load that memory resident operating system, the pre-installation environment, which has all of those tools. It allows me to do a system image recovery. All right, so we'll go ahead and I'm going to uncheck this. I'm not going to include a system image of the drive or anything, just for time purposes, because it could take a very long while, and we only have a half hour in this episode, so I don't want to bore you guys with waiting. But it does show you, right? It does show you that, hey, this is what's going to be, it does show you, if I can keep it in the screen there, what's going to be backed up, what's not going to be included. Now, I said scheduling, and you know what we've done, well, what we haven't done at all? We haven't done any scheduling, right? No. So notice that the schedule right here tells you when it's going to back up your files. If you use the optical drive, you better be around on Sunday, 7 p.m. after, we go to church or whatever.
Well, there better be a blank disk in that drive. That's
and
all he's saying.
You better have somebody ready to feed them in and feed them out, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change that schedule. All right, and then here's the option, right? Run backup on a schedule, and it is recommended. And we can change it to daily, monthly, weekly. And again, what day and what the time is. I will tell you, you might think, well, daily is really good. There is just like we talk about in things like security, Dan, you've mentioned this too, where we talk about convenience. As convenience goes up, security kind of wanes. As security goes up, we start to get less convenience. Well, I also want you to know that when you do daily backups, yeah, you're getting a lot of fault tolerance or resiliency to failure, but you're also increasing the administrative effort of the upkeep of the operating system, right? Because you're going to have to just remember, okay, especially if you talk about using optical disks, it might not be worth its weight in gold. So,
and that's a good point. You talked about the worth of it, right? It is more administrative effort, and you got to try to just find that balance of what's worth more of my time versus what's worth more of my convenience, right? So it's different for every organization, it's different for every network, so you just have to figure that out by kind of jumping in there, and the first time you go, how bad would it be if I lost this? Yeah. If that was no longer around, would that be mission critical? Would that drop us to our knees, or would that not be such a big deal?
Definitely. Weigh the administrative effort versus the gain, or loss, like Dan said. So both sides of the tracks for sure. And we're not going to change anything. Again, I just want to kind of show you where these settings are so that if they do ask you on the exam, you'll be ready. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to save the settings, and we'll give it a second here, and it's going to run the backup. And I want to show you all of the little screens that you'll see here, because you could potentially see these screens on the exam. We're not sure exactly which one, but we want you to be prepared. Notice that it shows us what's going on here, right? It says location. We can manage the space as well if we wanted. So for instance, manage space, we could come in here and say, hey, view the backups that are currently on the machine, gives me kind of the metadata, says, hey, this is how big the drive is, right? This is the free space that's in it, and this is how much data you're consuming, or space you're consuming within that drive, right? And we can view the individual backups here. And it looks like, it looks like it has finished here. So we can kind of view the existing backups, and this is great because it gives you the time frame that it's backed up, right? So if Dan comes to me and says, hey, Wes, I got a user that's in the sales department and says that they accidentally deleted a good portion of a folder that we need, I say, okay, Dan, well, do you know what time it is, right? And he goes, well, it's about such and such time. And we'll take this for example, right? It was on 7:20, right? It was somewhere in the middle of the day. It's like, okay, well, we know. I could come in here and I could say, okay, well, we have a backup for 7:20. If this happened on 7:21, it's probably a better example. I can restore to that earlier point in time. And I can recover that file. All right. So again, the recovery process isn't much different. We're more focused on the backup side of this. But if you see, I could restore our files here just by choosing the restore side, and what it'll end up doing is it'll search. Let's go ahead and search or browse here. Should be up. Well, there we go. And you can see when I browse there, backup of C. All right. And again, I could open the folder. And this is one of the great things in here. You can come in here, you can look at the folders, and I say, you know what, there's nothing in public, the public location that I need. Well, that's okay. I do want to go ahead and I want to add everything to pictures, right? So I just happen to have a desktop.ini file. I'm not worried about that. That's actually the remnants of a configuration of the desktop at the time that it took the backup. Again, it just kind of shows you that I could, if I wanted to, I could add that file. I could choose next. And it's intuitive enough to know where you should be setting this file. It says, hey, I've got the metadata, data about data that tells me where that location was. Do you want me to go ahead and restore that to that location? Or in this case, maybe it is a situation, a scenario, where Dan told the user to take that crucial file and save it on the network share. Don't save it locally. You saved it locally, and now we're having to go through this problem of trying to get that file back. If you would have saved it up on the network share, I run backups on the server every day. So I could say something like that where I say, you know what, I want to browse to a different location. I want to save this not locally. I want to do what I told you in the first place, and I want to end up, because you'll run into this with users, trust me. I want to go ahead and I want to save it up on that network share, right? And then I could do that, and it's not returned to its original location like you guys are a smart crowd out there. It's now on that server, and now Dan's essentially a system administration. The backups are happening daily. He doesn't have to worry about it anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and not do that after all that explanation, and we'll choose restore, and it's letting me know, it's saying, hey, you've already got a file in this location. Do you want to copy it and replace it? Don't copy, keep both files. I'm actually going to cancel this because as much as we didn't do, I'm not going to copy it. All right, and it says your files have been restored, even though it really didn't do anything. It thinks it did. We'll let it just think what it wants. But this is actually a system file. Even though it was in the user profile, it's a hidden file that you don't see by default on the desktop. But we don't have to worry about that. That's not really anything that's important for the exam. All right, Dan, I know we got about a few more minutes. I do want to show you that it's slightly different in Windows 8.1. In Windows 8 and 8.1, they kind of did away with the traditional Windows backup utility. It is still there, so let me be careful on saying that. They want you to move to a newer technology that they introduced starting with Windows 8, and that's called file history. File history is continued in Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and when we see the exam objectives move past the 900 series, we'll see that Windows 10 is probably going to be included there as well, and as part of that, file history is also there as well. So this is a great technology that if you learn it now, here in the 900 exam, that you're not only going to be learning it for one operating system, you're actually learning it for 3 different editions of Windows or versions of Windows, which is really, really good. So let me go ahead and we'll switch over to our Windows 8.1 box here. We'll log in and let me show you. I want to show you a couple different ways. I know we kind of left that there at the inside of our modern UI. I want you to know that I can get to file history a couple different ways. We can go the traditional desktop route, which we've kind of been doing a lot here. I can right click on my Windows tile. I could choose Control Panel. I can go into System and Security, and you'll see that we have down here, we have file history. And when I launch up file history, notice this launches file history in the traditional control panel. However, I'm not sure which one they're going to show you on the exam, so let's go ahead and let's let you have all of your bases covered. We'll go ahead and close down the traditional control panel interface, and we'll go to the Metro or Modern UI as well. So we'll go ahead and switch over to settings here. Remember, my head's kind of covering it up here. It always does that with the charms here. If I scroll down to the settings charm, I choose change PC settings, and then if we scroll down, you probably already seen it when we went to the recovery section there, update and recovery. And then from update and recovery, not only do you have Windows Update and recovery, you also have file history here. All right, and understand that I can turn file history on and see it says back up your personal drive, and it's already backing it up to a certain location, but I'm going to actually start this and we'll start the process over. And I can select a different drive, and notice it lets me know what drive that might be. You don't, in the modern UI, you don't really get as much flexibility. I could select the same drive. It's going to the same drive there, so it really didn't do anything there. But I do want to show you that interface. I like the control panel interface better than I do, and it's not that I don't like the modern UI, but it's kind of like the difference between asking somebody like, you know, for instance, Dan, who's familiar with command prompt, a terminal, right, versus the graphical user interface, right? Terminal has so much more things that you can do, because if I don't have the button, I can't perform that functionality. Well, that's kind of akin to the control panel version of file history versus modern UI. We don't have a lot of options there, right? Control panel is a more mature, if however you would say that, interface. So again, it does have a few more bells and whistles. So that being said, let's drop back to the control panel. Again, system and security, I know I did that kind of fast. Did that with my superpowers, and then file history. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off. I did this for a reason, because I want to kind of show you when you would come in here, this is what you would see. You would see that there isn't anything set up here. Understand that you can select your drives. So for instance, I can select drives, and I do have local disk Z there as well.
Z
but
for our Australian and English counterparts.
That's right. But something that we didn't have in Windows 7, which is why I wanted to show you this, is I also have storage spaces. We created in another episode, Dan and I, when we were looking at some of the features, we put together a storage space here, aggregated a couple of drives together. Well, I can also use storage spaces for file history, and I really like that capability too, because if one of those drives fails, I still have access to my backup. So it's kind of like backup to
redundancy to the redundancy.
That's right. It's in the dictionary for the definition of redundancy, it says see redundancy.
Recursive redundancy. That's what we're going to go. We just coined the phrase right here.
Most definitely. So you can also add a network location here as well. So let me go ahead and just take a second to do that. If you have File Explorer on, you can end up seeing like you have these clickable hot icons, as they're kind of called. And I could choose DC1 here if I'm in the right. Oh, no, I do have to authenticate here, so let me make sure that I do that. It's not going to like it. It's not going to just let you in because you knocked on the door. You have to know the secret password. And then once you do that, you can select the location, and I can choose select folder. And now you see, just like before, it shows up in the list. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to do storage spaces just because I like storage spaces. And then what we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll choose OK. All right, and it says, do you want to use this drive for file history again? All right, the drive doesn't have your most recent files. That's perfectly fine. I'm okay with that. And then it tells me that it's going to copy the location. All right, and it has. And I could run it right here from this hyperlink. I also want to show you that you have the exclusions. Exclusions just mean take this library, but don't take that library. I just want my pictures. I don't care about videos, right? I just want pictures. I don't care about certain documents. Or I just care about documents, and I don't care about Johnny's MP3 collection that he shouldn't be storing on this machine anyways, right? You also have advanced settings too, and the advanced settings are really, really cool in the fact that they give you the ability to determine how long you want to save copies, and how often, I should say, again, because remember, it's about scheduling. That's the whole point of this, is scheduling backups. Notice it gives you the schedule on it as well. I also can say how much of the drive do I want to use in the offline cache, right? Do I want to start overwriting files when it gets to 20% of the disk space? Again, that's going to be up to you as to what you choose. A lot of times I just go with the defaults, but you, for whatever reason, like Dan mentioned it, it's personal computing, and it's not really a one-size-fits-all solution, or there wouldn't be any options here, right? Keep save versions. How often do you want to keep the version of a file? And you can see that I want to keep them forever, right, by default. Do I want to use and integrate this with Home Group? You can also do that as well. So that's also a great thing to have. I tell you what, let me go ahead real quick. And I know we're well out of time here, Dan. If you'll just bear with me here, we'll call this a recovery. This is our recovery TXT. We'll jump back down to file recovery. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and run this now. And hopefully it'll run for us. It might
already be done.
It might already be done, absolutely. So let's see. You know what? There's only one way to find out. Here, we're going to be flying without a net, and I didn't put this in the notes, Dan, so we are flying without the,
Fingers crossed.
we're walking across the high wire and the net's gone.
That's
so
right.
we'll go ahead.
Who moved my net?
Don't fall.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and see if Wes falls on his face here. If not, I mean, if I do, you guys can always laugh with us along.
This is must-see
I'll be
TV
dying
right
inside,
here.
but you guys can laugh with us out there. So, all right, so let's go ahead, and the thing you can do here is you can restore personal files. They made it very easy to do this. I really like this interface. If we go ahead and we run the restore personal files, notice that it says, okay, so what do you want to restore? Right, well, I have desktop here, and I got a file location, and look at there. Not only did it get that, but it also got the desktop.ini file, and I didn't even have to tell it in the backup. It's there, but that's a system file. I'm not really worried about it, but there's my recovery text. I choose restore, and if I go out to my desktop, it opened in File Explorer. I'm hoping, fingers crossed,
Yes.
that sure enough, even after we took it out of the recycle bin, we recycled it, recovery text is back there. So Dan, again, you guys out there, thank you for bearing with me on this one. I know this one is going to run a little bit longer. We got a lot more to cover, but these are just some of the things that you're going to need to know, and we didn't want to shortchange you in any way.
That's right. Learn how to take your backups, ladies and gentlemen, because they can definitely save your life when it comes to being a computer tech. Even if you're not, if you're just a person who has a computer, which is most people, right? Like Wes said, they've got those pictures. They're priceless. You can't get them back. So make sure that you're backing them up some way, shape, or form. Windows affords us a great backup solution for even the home PC. So take advantage of it, learn how to use it, and use it to your advantage. That being said, as Wes was alluding to, we are out of time for this episode. Come back for part 2 because we have plenty of more preventative things that we can do to keep our computers on the up and up. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Wes Bryan.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.